is about creating tables. Before we start creating tables, let's understand briefly what a data type. So in any database, there is a concept called the data type. The data type denotes what type of data could be stored in particular field. Based on it, database will store the data in that particular type. For example, if your data type is int, the DB will store it, as a 4 character as a int data type in the storage. Also, it also allows DB to sort, data based on data type you've created. So example would be, let's say you created a data type by name int for a salary of employee, and when you try to run a SQL query of select star from employee order by salary, it will use the number comparison and not a string comparison. So it will give 5,000 number, in the last in the series compared to lowest number in the first. So it will sort it based on the data type. Like if you have a string, it will show A as the first and then B as the next. So that's how it works. Now in MySQL, there are, or maybe in any SQL any database type, you have to know, like, okay, there are three main group of data type you have to be aware of. One is a text, which means it can accept string character. So the first one is a character, which means it will only accept one character. Okay. Then there is a varchar. In varchar, you can have multiple characters. It's basically a string. Only thing is you have to specify like what's the max number of character it can accept. So you can say like varchar in a bracket 500, something like that. Uh, so it means that it can accept max 500 character, but that doesn't mean that database will be storing the 500 character as a default size for all the rows. It depends. It will be using the actual storage, actual value of a field that to store. Then we have something called as a text data type. Text, which means there is no limit to the string data. It's more like a like employee description or anything that's large column. The second group here is the int column. Int is where it will store anywhere we have to store any number data type like int, int, big int, float. Example would be, let's say you want to store employee ID, so that we can store it as an int column. Or if it's a really big int, big number, then you can store it as a big int column. If it has a decimal, then you can store it as a double or a float column. Then there is a concept of a third group, which is also very important, which is called the date. So dates are used to store any date kind of column, like employee registration date, employee birth date. The date by default does not have a time part of it, but date time do. So if you are specific like registration date and time, we could have a date time column, and timestamp is similar to date time column. So this is the example where example of a small example of database where like I explained before, the relation database. So the first one is the employee table created. Here you have like different fields: name, address, age, experience. Now if you watch carefully, there is a department ID column. This is where the relationship comes in picture. The department ID is, if you see, it is one. Here also we have a second table which is department. There also we have a department ID column. So these two tables are implicitly linked by a department ID column. So which means when you say okay it's a one, it means it denotes that this particular employee belongs to department with ID 1, which is marketing. The reason we separate out the two table based on relation data model is to I mean that's how the model is, and it helps in organizing the data, each group of data in a different bucket, which is which is a table. So let's move on to the next step, which is building the foundation. How do we create table? How do we a drop table, how do we alter table,